I don't mean to pick on Harvard, but this is too good to let go. So I'm going to tell you about Harvard. I should say that I went there, so this is a personal pleasure as well as an analytic one. They did try, to be fair, they did try to persuade me that everything that happened there is the greatest thing that could possibly happen. They did try. They tried very hard for a long time. It didn't work, but it wasn't for lack of trying. Okay. Harvard University is located basically in two places, Cambridge, Massachusetts, and Boston, Massachusetts. Mostly in Cambridge, but the medical school and so on are in Boston. If you are a university in a city, your property, the land, the buildings, the machinery inside of it, is exempt from taxation. A poor family living in a broken down part of Boston has to pay a property tax on the land of its house, on the building it's living in, often on its automobile and so on, as you are familiar with here in New York too. People of Boston have to pay. The average person has to pay. Harvard doesn't have to pay. Right off the bat, this ought to raise a question. Why? Harvard is the richest university on this planet. It currently has in its portfolio, last time I looked, $36 billion of stocks and bonds. Are you aware of what this means? Think about it. Think about it. They are much richer than any other university. They're much richer than Yale, which bothers them at Yale, something awful. They are richer than Princeton. They are richer than the University of Texas. Those are the really rich places in the United States. So they sit at the top. Okay. Over the years, the good people of Boston, many of whom are watching this evening, have taken it into their minds to think that there's something remotely unfair about all of this, that the average family in Boston, having trouble paying the bills for its housing, has to pay a tax to Boston on the value of its house, its car, its building, its land. And the logic, by the way, is what you pay in property tax pays for the services the city provides. Public education, the most expensive thing that city governments do anywhere in the United States. Police, which is a local responsibility. Fire department, local responsibility. Keeping the streets clean, all of that. That's what everybody pays locally because you have to have those services, or at least we think so, and so everybody pays a tax. Harvard has many buildings, so it gets lots of services. It has many employees who get lots of services. You know, they need the fire department occasionally and the police department occasionally, and their children go to school, you know, that kind of thing. But they get all the services, Harvard does, all schools like that do. They get all the services from the cities in which they're located, but they don't pay for them. The rest of the people in Boston pay for the service of the fire department given to Harvard, the service of the police department given to Harvard, the service of the public education of the people who work and study at Harvard. You get the picture? Everybody pays for the services delivered to Harvard. Let's do that again one more time. The richest thing in Boston, which is Harvard, is subsidized by having services delivered free to them that the rest of the people who don't have any money pay for. This is called Robin Hood in reverse. You steal from the middle and the bottom to subsidize the rich. Harvard loves this. How do I know that? Answer. When the people of Boston got angry about this, they pushed through the legislature, Harvard didn't like it, something that has been pushed through legislatures in other towns, like in Princeton, New Jersey, because of Princeton, or in New Haven, Connecticut, because of Yale, and even here in New York with Columbia and so on. It's called everywhere the pilot program, P-I-L-O-T, which stands for Payments in Lieu of Taxes. It is a voluntary payment because they don't have to. The law gives them exemption, but they make a voluntary payment just out of their sheer civic responsibility. Please forget that the civic responsibility came home to them when people were very angry in the community, and it dawned on them that if you're an institution with lots of buildings in a neighborhood where people are angry at you, things could get out of control and your buildings might, who knows, fall down, burn up. You might be in a problem. See, for Yale, it's right next to a very poor neighborhood. Columbia is right next to a very poor neighborhood. Princeton, of course, doesn't have this problem. But the people of New Jersey didn't like it. So they forced through a pilot program. So let's see for 2015 how the pilot program worked in Harvard. Okay. The exempt value of the property Harvard has in Boston, this is just Boston, not Cambridge, $1.5 billion. That's what Harvard says is the value of the land and the buildings they have. You'll notice that it's more than, say, your house. Okay? $1.5 billion. If it were taxable at the same rate that everybody else in Boston, all the Boston Irish who've lived there for 1 million years, and all the Italians and all the other ethnic groups that make up the population of Boston, what they all pay for their houses and so on, if Harvard had to pay the same, they would owe every year $47 million. They'd have to give Boston 47. Keep that number in your mind, 47. What does the pilot program, their voluntary offering, what do they pay to Boston, or at least on paper, what are they supposed to pay? $10 million. Somewhere in their nobility, in their voluntary commitment, the number 47 shrank to the number 10. But we're not done. So all they really owe is 10. Not the 47 if they paid the same rate that everybody else does. They get a special one for their voluntary payment, only 10. 1/5, 4/5, forget about it. Imagine if you went to the local tax office and asked them to forget about 4/5 of your tax obligation. They would do things to you I can't even think about. Okay, so now they owe 10. They got rid of 5 of those by saying that the wonderful things they do for the community are worth 5 out of the 10. You know, they have really beautiful buildings. And in front of the buildings, tulips and shrubs. And local people can go to the library. It may cost a bit, and they may look at you funny, but you can go to the library. They worked all that out, and that's worth $5 million out of the 10. So they don't have to pay the 10. They only owe 5. And then the city of Boston is where I got this. This is the official City of Boston records. Here's how much they actually paid out of the 5 left. They paid, ready? $2.2 million. If they paid the same as everybody else, $47 million. What did they actually get away, pay? 2. That's the achievement of an institution of higher learning, the bearer of our civilization. That's its level of responsibility to the host city where it is located, to which they give in this way the middle finger of all their hands. It is, by the way, the same thing happens at Yale. I lived in New Haven most of my adult life. I know all the details of what Yale doesn't do. Yale replicates this behavior. It just doesn't have as much money as Harvard. To keep in mind the proportions, $2 million is what Harvard pays to Boston. Here is the annual income of Yale. Every year, Harvard takes in, through all the monies that it gets, I'll use the last year for which there's numbers, fiscal year 2015, $4.5 billion. In other words, what they paid to Boston is less than 0.5% just of the money they got in 1 year. And they don't even want to pay that. If they paid twice as much, it would be less than 1% of what they take in. They're making money that they don't need. It's almost as if there's a certain principle or pleasure involved in not paying your taxes. A $36 billion institution that services the richest people on this planet can't pay the taxes. By the way, the story in Cambridge, which is where most of Harvard is exactly the same.